Have you noticed that even when you try to challenge your anxious thoughts, some beliefs feel so ingrained, so powerful, that no amount of logic seems to touch them? And have you ever realized that some of those beliefs may not even sound like thoughts in your head, but more like an inner voice you've carried since childhood? Messages from past abuse that still shape how you see yourself today, even if you don't always notice them. Welcome back to Quieting Anxiety. I'm Dr. Monica Frank, and in today's episode, we're continuing a series of episodes focused on advanced cognitive techniques, practical tools that can help you go even deeper into changing anxious thinking patterns. If you're new to this podcast, I urge you to listen to the episodes in order. They build on one another, and the more advanced techniques we're covering now rely on skills introduced earlier. In today's episode, we're going to explore another aspect of advanced cognitive restructuring, specifically how to counter the damaging messages you may have learned in childhood if you experienced abuse. And don't immediately dismiss this episode as irrelevant, because many people have experienced emotional abuse and don't even realize it. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to guide you through a brief grounding exercise. Because the topic we're about to explore can bring up painful memories, it's important to help your body and mind feel anchored in the present. Take a slow, gentle breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. Now let your eyes gently rest on something in your environment. Notice its shape, its color, its texture. Remind yourself, I am here in this moment. I am safe right now. Take another slow breath in and out. Now bring your attention to your body. Notice the contact of your feet with the floor, or your body resting in the chair. Feel the weight of your body being supported. You don't have to hold yourself up alone in this moment. You are supported. If your mind begins to drift to difficult memories or feelings, gently bring it back to this moment by naming one thing you can see, one thing you can hear, and one thing you can touch. Finally, place your hand over your heart and say quietly to yourself, I am safe in this moment. I can choose what to believe. I am here to learn and to heal. Take one more deep, calming breath, and when you're ready, we'll begin. At any point if this episode is too intense, it's okay to pause and focus on grounding yourself again. Now, if you've been listening to the Quieting Anxiety podcast from the beginning, you already understand the basics of cognitive restructuring. Identifying irrational thoughts, examining the evidence, and creating more balanced alternatives. That's the foundation we've been building in earlier episodes. And again, if you haven't listened to the earlier episodes, I urge you to do so before delving into this more advanced topic. But even though you are familiar with cognitive restructuring, when it comes to anxiety related to trauma, the thoughts aren't just surface level worries like, what if I embarrass myself in a meeting? Instead, they are deeply ingrained messages that were often repeated to you in childhood by the very people who were supposed to protect you. These are messages like, you'll never amount to anything, you're weak if you cry, or no one will ever love you like I do. They are not only irrational thoughts, they are core beliefs about who you are, and they tend to be much harder to change because they feel so true. That's why this is considered advanced cognitive skills. It requires working with the most intense and deeply rooted cognitions, beliefs that were often instilled through repeated emotional abuse and sometimes reinforced alongside physical or sexual abuse. Because whenever physical or sexual abuse occurs, emotional abuse is always present as well. If this episode seems too intense, it may be necessary to seek therapeutic support to assist you with it. Trauma creates these lies you may believe about yourself because abuse doesn't just harm in the moment. It teaches children distorted lessons about themselves. Over time, those lessons form powerful internal messages such as, I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, I'm to blame. Even though the abuse happened in the past, these messages remain in the present. And it's the present beliefs that continue to fuel anxiety, shame, and self-doubt today. But that's actually good news. If the pain is in the present, it means you have the power to change it. You can't change past trauma events, but you can change the impact they have on you today. When working with everyday anxious thoughts, it's often enough to ask questions like, what's the evidence for this thought? Or what's the worst that could happen and how would I cope? But trauma-based cognitions are different. They were repeated over and over during your most formative years. They came from people in positions of authority. They were not just thoughts, they became your sense of self. That's why they require advanced strategies. They don't usually respond to quick, logical challenges. Instead, they require persistence, reattribution, repetition, and self-compassion. When working with these deeply ingrained trauma messages, there are several ways you can begin to approach them. One approach is to practice distancing the message. When a thought like, I'll never succeed, comes up, you can remind yourself, this is a trauma message, not reality. By naming it as something you were taught, you start to separate it from your true self. From there, it helps to use reattribution. Remind yourself, this belief came from someone who hurt me. It was about their sickness or anger, not about who I am. Shifting the blame back to where it belongs weakens the hold of the message. Once you've named it and reshaped it, the next step is to create counter messages, truths that directly oppose the lies. For example, instead of, you'll never amount to anything, replace it with, I am capable of growth and change. Instead of, no one will ever love you like I do, replace it with, I deserve love without abuse. Finally, remember that healing takes repetition. Trauma messages became strong because they were repeated over and over to you in your formative years. You can weaken them and strengthen the truth in the same way by repeating these counter messages until they feel more natural and more powerful than the lies. Let's take one of the common trauma messages. You're weak if you cry. If you were told this as a child, you may have learned to distrust your own feelings. But here's the truth. Crying isn't weakness. It's a natural expression of hurt. It's how our body and mind process pain. Abusers don't want you to cry because they may have to acknowledge they hurt you. The restructuring to this message might look like this. First, label it. This is a trauma message. Reattribute it by telling yourself, this came from someone who didn't want to take responsibility for hurting me. Give yourself a counter message then. Crying is not weakness, it is healing. Finally, repeat your counter message often. Say it to yourself whenever the old message arises. The more often you practice, the more the truth begins to take root. One of the hardest parts of working with trauma-based beliefs is that they don't shift quickly. You may know logically that the abuser's message was false, but emotionally it can still feel true. That's why practice is essential. Just as the lies were repeated to you over and over, you need to repeat the truths until they begin to feel more natural. This is where the companion audios, Healing from the Lies of Childhood Abuse, and the daily practice audio, Strengthening the Truth for Abuse Survivors, come in. They're designed to guide you through the process of recognizing the lies, affirming the truths, and repeating them until they begin to replace the old messages. I encourage you to use them often, even daily if possible, because frequency and repetition are what make the new beliefs stronger than the old ones. This work is not easy. It's considered advanced cognitive restructuring because the cognitions you're working with are some of the most painful and deeply ingrained. They were formed through abuse, physical, sexual, or emotional, and they can feel like the very core of who you are. But they are not you. They are the lies of your past. Your present healing comes from refusing to let those lies define you. So I invite you to reflect on the messages that still echo from your childhood. Begin to label them as trauma messages, not truths. Reattribute the blame to where it belongs. And most importantly, practice repeating the counter messages until your mind begins to believe them. And as I explained previously, listen to the companion audio, Healing from the Lies of Childhood Abuse, and the daily practice audio, Strengthening the Truth for Abuse Survivors, to practice these truths again and again. When you listen to these audios, it may be necessary to use some grounding, breathing, or relaxation methods before and after. Before we finish, let's take a moment to ground yourself again. You've just spent some time thinking about difficult experiences and beliefs, and it's important to come back fully into the present. Take a slow breath in and let it go gently. Notice your surroundings. Look around you and name one thing you can see right now. Then listen for one sound you can hear. Finally, bring your attention to one thing you can physically feel. Maybe your hands resting in your lap or your feet against the floor. Remind yourself, I am here in this moment. The past is not happening now. I am safe. Take another breath in and out. Let your shoulders soften just a little. And finally, place a hand over your heart and repeat after me if you'd like. I am safe. I am grounded. I am choosing healing for myself, one step at a time. Another deep breath. And let's end with this affirmation. The lies I was taught do not define me. I am worthy of love, respect, and healing. Carry this sense of calm and safety with you as you move forward from today's practice. Until next time, keep practicing, keep breathing, and keep moving forward.